psychological safety really focuses on creating environments in a workplace that will support the creativity, innovation, risk taking process for employees. It is really a methodology of helping individuals and companies create safe spaces for the employees to learn and even to make mistakes and to fail and not be concerned about retaliation, isolation, or losing their jobs. So today we're talking about workplace conflicts, or what some people might say, people have beef, right? And how this shapes and sometimes distorts corporate culture. Sometimes there's minor disagreements or major disputes at work, and conflicts can influence team dynamics, employee morale, and even a company's public image. We don't necessarily handle conflict, and we don't always receive feedback. And sometimes we allow our personal stuff to come into the workplace, and it impacts how we interact with one another. And so this week I'm in California and I was working with a team, a CFO group, about 27 people. We were doing a high performing team workshop and development. Right there, they've been in a lot of transition. We talked about team formations. Some of you may know what those formations are. So we got forming, norming, storming, performing, adjourning. And so we went through that. They identified where they were, but what we got to the root of was there's also a lot of conflict. So when we get to the storming stage, between norming and storming, there's a lot of conflict. And really, most of the workplace conflict is one or two things. It's issue based. And so issue based conflict is we're talking about a specific issue, how we should proceed, what a process is, right? It really is about the work. But what often happens is that the majority of our conflict in the workplace is interpersonal. So that's the other type of conflict that we're dealing with. So we got issue based, and then we have this interpersonal conflict. And then the personal conflict is, I just don't like you. And my like or dislike for you might not even have anything to do with you as an individual or anything that you've done to me. But it could be just my perception about, should you be my boss? Should you be on this team? Are you smart enough? Your school? It could even be race and gender based. And oftentimes, unfortunately, it is. And we see this with teams that we work with. And when we're doing coaching, sometimes it's like, why are you so rigid in this? And if we find out that this person just doesn't want to be managed by someone. So, got two people in the workplace. Rachel is the manager, Jim is the staff, and Jim doesn't want to work for Rachel. It's just that simple. But that's the stuff that disrupts our work. That interpersonal conflict is the things that really slow us down. It's not about the work, and it impacts how we do the work. And we find that communication causes some really big things, and three that I want to talk about. It's a disruption to team unity. So conflict can create these divisions with teams, loyalty to one person over another, a lot of gossip, misinformation, lies about someone. It becomes very competitive, and it leads to breaking that these breakdowns in trust and cooperation among team members, which ultimately impacts productivity. It impacts morale. It impacts just overall cohesion. And I think one of the biggest things that it impacts is collaboration. Right. So if I choose to not like someone for reasons that have nothing to do with the work, then my productivity is going to be impacted. My collaboration, our ability to be creative and innovative is also going to be impacted in this work. And so that actually impacts the bottom line. I remember working on this team and I was running into some conflict. Actually, I was a consultant and it came down this client, she didn't like me. And I was new to the team. And it turns out, because you don't like me, I'm like, wait a minute, what did I do to you? I had a conversation with her along with someone I was working with. So we had a conversation with her, and it turned out I reminded her of someone else. So her dislike and how she was treating me, her tone, the standoffishness, it had nothing to do with me. And so I told her, I was like, hey, you either got to get to know me and evaluate me based on who I am, or you're going to be overshadowed and miss out on a great opportunity to work with me, the work that I do, how I can contribute to your company, your firm, because you're viewing me through the lens of a bad interaction you had with someone else or somebody that I don't even know the other person. And so those are the things that come up for people. And I think we have to ask ourselves when we start to feel resistance and frustration, or even if we say things like, oh, I don't like this person, we really need to sit back and ask ourselves, why? Is it me or is it this person? Because data and studies show that most of interpersonal conflict has more to do with the person who is upset versus the person that they're upset with. So the other impact that conflict has is this lower productivity. So when we're dealing with conflict in the work or microaggressions, belittling, negative comments, and people being unkind to one another at work, it takes away from their ability to do their work. So it causes delays, it decreases efficiency and project completion. People don't show up. You have increased absenteeism, which impacts productivity, and then you just have turnover, right? So you walk in a department where they have all of this conflict, interpersonal conflict, or either issue-based conflict that turns into interpersonal conflict because they don't have a framework or a way to have healthy workplace conflict and dissent, right? We don't know how to disagree respectfully at work about a workplace issue, so it turns into something interpersonal. And so we focus, our focus is shifted from the work to resolving a dispute. And it puts this burden on the person with the highest ranking leadership title to deal with this instead of the employees being empowered to call it out and deal with it themselves. Because we find that a lot of people don't see themselves as leaders within their organization. They're always looking up and outward to someone else to be that leader. And then finally, the other impact of this kind of interpersonal conflict or this beef that people are having at work, it dampens morale. So morale takes a huge hit, and this sort of persistent conflict contributes to a negative work environment, reducing job satisfaction and employee engagement. And we're in a time now where work is moving faster. The demands on employees to do more with less has increased. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? We actually could be learning more, be more impactful, and expanding even our breadth of knowledge. But sometimes, because of the conflict, our inability to discuss some of these things really does impact uh, and the morale of the company, which then you find that people are talking badly about the organization, your department, and we see this show up on social media, like we talked about last week. So, what are some of these root causes? Some of it is regular stuff like resource competition. So, we have these limited resources such as time and money and materials, and that can create competition and conflict between individuals and departments. So, there could be conflict in that, right? The sales team gets all the attention, right? And the tax department gets all the blame. So, then we feel like these resources and how we're viewed as either being a benefit to the company or a drain on the company because of resources. We have unclear roles and responsibilities. When teams have a lot of conflict, one, they forget what the vision is. What are we trying to accomplish and why? And how does it fit into the larger overall picture at the organization? And then when team members are unclear about their roles or they feel that their responsibilities overlap with others, it can lead to disputes. And someone needs to clear that up. And one of the things I always say when we start a project, every project, and it might seem like, why do we need this? Or it might even appear that it takes too much time, but every project should have a clear charter. It should outline roles and responsibilities, what our goals are. That project plan should be so inclusive that there's no ambiguity about who does what, when is it done, what our expectations are, even how we meet, how often we meet, what the meeting should include. Does it have an agenda? Right? So all of the roles and responsibilities on how we engage with one another should be outlined. So people have a blueprint to go back to and say, this is how we're going to operate. And that really helps when people join a team. And I think it's even useful if the same four people are always working together. We should debrief what went well, what didn't go well. And we should build that into our next project as a team together. And then there's miscommunication. So when we work on highly diverse teams, so people from have different cultures and heritage, work experiences, and those work experiences can include the types of companies, industries. It can include the size of companies. I worked at a small company. I worked at a large public company. I worked in consulting. Right? You have these diverse teams, and we all have lingo and language that we bring to that, and we also have different understandings of what sometimes what words mean and how they're used. And so that miscommunication can lead to a lack of clarity or misunderstanding in communication and can lead to assumptions and disagreements. And assumptions are the worst, thinking we know what someone wants or expects, and we don't. And so I always say active listening and asking very good, open ended questions and reiterating and even before you walk away from a communication, saying, repeating back to the person, what I understand for you, what I understand that you mean from this, or what your expectations are, or what you want to see is this. And then walk through what your understanding is and allow that person to say yes or no. Or because then they'll say, oh, maybe I wasn't clear. Maybe I didn't communicate well versus me misunderstanding, going back, thinking I'm operating under the proper assumptions, and those assumptions are wrong. The other thing is maybe other root cause to some of this beef or conflict that we're having in the workplace is differing values and belief systems, right? Individual differences in values, beliefs, and even priorities can cause friction among team members. So if you work in a matrix type organization where you could be working on multiple projects for different people, different team leads or managers, we might have to prioritize. And sometimes we think we know what is the best priority? What's the top priority? And oftentimes I feel like we prioritize based on pressure. As a leader, I could be just checking in more pressure. I may have a sense of my project is so important. I need you to give me 100% of your attention. And so you feel a sense of pressure from me based on how I'm communicating the urgency around what I want you to do. But my colleagues' project could actually have a lot more priority, and they're not communicating in the same way. So I think it's really good when you work for multiple people, you have multiple reporting lines, that those teams need to meet together. We need to understand what are the real priorities? What's the need to have and versus the want to have? Because sometimes we want stuff to be done within our time frame, but really the need for something else could be greater. So, what is your role in managing conflict at work? The first thing I say that your role is, it's not just the leader's role based on the level they have in the organization. So, if they're a senior vice president and you're a vice president, doesn't mean that that SVP is more skilled or more responsible for managing conflict. One of the things that we do with our teams when we're working with them at different companies, we actually have them set up some rules of engagement and they have to create a mindset. So we have all these different types of mindset: open mindset, abundance, closed mindset, process mindset, goal mindset, all of these different types of mindset. And so I have my group come in and say, we're going to create a team mindset for us. It's specific to us. It's going to include how we engage, but it's also that mindset is like, how do we operate? And oftentimes, those teams say, we want to operate from a place of abundance, that there's a lot of opportunities, that we're focused both on the process and we're focused on the goal. And so I think if your team and your department doesn't have clear rules of engagement, because we assume that people know our company values and that they know exactly how we're supposed to act at work. And sometimes we don't. And I do think it's important for the team and a conversation managed by the leadership of that team to say, this is what our expectations on how we interact with each other. We're going to be an inclusive team. So that means everybody's thoughts and ideas are valued. And there's no rank here, even in your title. You can disagree with me as the boss. You can say, Jeannine, you're doing too much and we're getting off track. Right. So as a leader, I am open to feedback. I'm open to correction by everyone on my team, but we have rules on how we engage with one another. So we know that if someone comes to me and they're direct, open, and honest, that it's also going to be wrapped in thoughtfulness and kindness because we don't want the message to be lost because of tone and how someone says something. We need to model the kind of behavior that we want to receive. We need to set a tone for how conflict is handled, demonstrating respect, patience, and fairness in all of these interactions. We want to be clear in our communication, right? Clear and concise. We need to be action oriented and be goal focused, right? These goals should be communicated clearly to prevent any misunderstandings. And then finally, we need to empower our employees. Leaders should empower employees and empower their team members with tools and autonomy to resolve conflicts constructively. And they can do that because it goes back to the first thing I said, right? We have these rules of engagement and we've determined how we're going to work together. It's so important that in your organizations that you promote open communication, you recognize and reward your employees and acknowledge individuals and teams for achieving the achievements to motivate and validate employees' contributions, right? We should have a system where we can identify, hey, this person is doing a great job. And we want to acknowledge that this team works so well together. We want to be able to model that and debrief after a project and say, what are the things that worked well? And I'll tell you, the best thing for every team is to figure out how to build trust with one another. So we can demonstrate reliability and openness as leaders on our teams to build trust within that team, right? Because everyone knows that we all are up to the same thing. We're focused on the same end goal. And I know that when I win, everyone wins. And so people aren't worried about being overshadowed. They don't have competition between one another. They don't have this scarcity mindset that there's not enough to go around for everyone. And then finally, let's encourage some feedback, right? Create these channels for constructive feedback that's actually focused on the future. I like constructive feedback that addresses what's now, but we take that, what is happening now, what we want to see you repeat that you do really well, and how that's going to benefit you and us as a team and the company in the future. So we can allow employees to voice their concerns and suggestions, be willing to listen to different points of view and be willing to share yours without trying to force your point of view on someone else. Because we can have different perspectives and still create harmony.